This interview is a part of the Oklahoma Historical Society's Oral History Program Living Legends Collection. This interview was originally conducted on the 15th of February, 1971. The interview was originally conducted by Mr. Pendleton Woods. The interviewee is Mrs. George Martin, that's capital Martin, of Guthrie, Oklahoma. This material is being re-recorded on the 20th of October, 1986 for inclusion in the permanent collections of the Oral History Program by Judith Michener.
This is Penn Woods interviewing for the Oklahoma Living Legends. This is February the 15th, 1971. I'm in the home of Mrs. George Martin in Guthrie, Oklahoma, and we'll be talking about some of the early days of Guthrie and some of the experiences of the community and the growth of the community from Mrs. Martin. Ms. Martin, I wonder to begin with if you would, I'll hand you the mic, if you will tell us a little about your birth, who your parents were, and where you went to school, and your early days.
I was born in Lamar, Missouri, and my name is May Calvert, and my mother and father were Mr. and Mrs. W.S. Calvert. And we came to Oklahoma after the opening in about I don't know.
Well, that's
all right.
In the 1890s?
Early 90s.
In the early 1890s.
Mm-hmm.
Tell about your school.
And I went to school at Mulhall, Oklahoma, Mulhall, and Central State Normal at Edmond. And we moved to Guthrie in 1900, my parents did. And my father was county superintendent at that time. And I taught school in Guthrie when I was a girl and was very fortunate in the last years of my teaching to have Mamie Oliver as one of my prized pupils. She was smart. I never had to correct her, never had to tell her how to get her work. She just naturally knew how to go about and get everything done. And about that time, I had a nice young man on the string named George Martin. And, of course, I was more interested in matrimony than I was school or anything else around town. But I had a very lovely childhood.
Why don't you tell us a little about the school, describe the school you attended at Mulhall.
Oh, it was just a nice country school, and everybody got their lessons and would graduate from school. There wasn't any discipline at all. Everybody just had a good time.
How large was the school?
Oh, I don't know how large it was. It was a good school. My father was principal of the high school. They had about 6 teachers. That was a nice school, nice country school. In those days, everybody had a big family. So there's more than one child in a school, a family to come to school. So they had a nice school, good school. I thought it was pretty good. I wasn't so dumb.
I was wondering, now you taught, you went to Central State
Edmond.
At Edmond. What year did you graduate?
I didn't graduate. I just kept finishing along, just kept going. I went going while I was teaching school.
Oh, I see. How many students were there then?
How many students? Oh, I have no idea. As I said, I wasn't interested in the number of students. Edmond's always been a good school and had a large enrollment.
It's one of the very early.
It's one of the, I think it was one of the outstanding schools in the state at that time. Don't you think it was, Mamie? It must have been, because that's about the only one I ever heard of.
But it still is one of the outstanding schools.
Well, it is an outstanding school, and I think you'll get just as much education and training there as you can at any school, although I'm an OU fan.
There are 10,000 students there now.
Or more than that. Yes, there's more than that, I think.
I was wondering, just thinking in terms of how many there might have been about that time.
I have no idea.
Could you physically, how many buildings did you might not know the number, but describe the physical arrangement of the school at the time you attended?
Oh, really, I don't know. I boarded with some woman down there, and I don't even know her name. But, of course, I really don't know how many buildings there were. We just went from one to the other. And you know, in those days, you didn't pay too much. I didn't pay any attention to it. If I did, I have forgotten, because that's been some time ago.
Now, in teaching, how long did you teach?
I taught 4 years.
4 years. What were some of the special problems of education at the time you were teaching? Can you think?
Well, I tell you, so far as I was concerned, I don't think the teachers had any problems. They was all young girls, and they got in there, and they didn't know enough not to just give their all to it. Isn't that right?
That's right.
No, we didn't loaf on the job, and you would have, let's see, the last year I taught, I had 39 boys, and let me see, that's 52, 13 girls, 39 boys, and listen, every kid recited every day, because that was part of your business. If the child went home to school and hadn't recited the lesson, the mother thought she was a poor teacher. So you let them say something. They got something to go on every day. I don't know what it would be, but everybody got to do something.
What were the basic classes?
You taught. Let's see. You taught the 4th grade. I taught. We had every morning. We had some music of some kind, and I think we had maybe a Bible reading and a prayer, Lord's Prayer. No comments. Because, listen, teachers in those days didn't know enough to comment. I didn't myself, none of the rest of them did either, I don't think. But then, anyway, that was part of it. And that was discipline. The children respected. They gave attention. Then we sang a song. I don't know what it would be. God Bless America. No, they didn't have that in that day. What did they sing? America. America. That's what they sang. And I know it was good. And then we taught reading. And the multiplication table, that's one of the main stumbling blocks of the 4th grade. They had to know that. And we had some English and spelling, math. And then at that time, they commenced to teaching music in these schools. And the teachers that wasn't qualified, they had a music teacher. And she came once a week. You remember her, Mamie? Mm-hmm. She came once a week and put notes on the board, and the children just loved all of that. They could just read music just like they could read a primer, couldn't they? And then she'd have them sing. She had a pitch pipe, and they'd sing. And then the first thing you know, they had the teachers teaching art. Nobody had ever had a painting lesson in their life. The teachers had to go to central place wherever they had that art teacher come and taught us. And the first thing we learned to paint was the beat. Then we could go to school the next day and have the little kids get out, and we had all shapes, sizes of beats. I'll never forget my art. That was part of it. And that was one of the new things. We had art and music in those schools. And home ed, physical ed. Who was she, Mamie, that come to our school and gave us?
I can't remember her name.
Her husband done something, I don't know what, and that was quite a thing. And any time the kids got unruly, have some physical ed and let them walk around the room, and that took off all the, it took off all of the heat and raised the windows, and we went through this and this and that, and the kids just loved it, and it was just got rid of all that restlessness. That was one of the best things for the teachers they ever had. You could raise the windows and let's have some physical ed.
Maybe they need some now.
Yeah. Listen, you could say that again if you want to. It would do them good. And really, the children were all happy. We never had any discipline problems, did we, Mary? I never had any. I had one. I'll have to tell you this one funny, Mamie. Well, I had a young boy come in from the country. He's as big as I was, and I think as old as I was, because I wasn't too old. And he was in our 4th grade, and every day after school he'd get out and he'd whip every kid on the school. He was poor, rusty-looking hands, great big old country. He could have whipped the principal and all that. And so we didn't know what we could do with him. I couldn't do anything with him. The principal, she couldn't do anything. She's a little frail, Miss Byrne, frail woman. so said, well, get him in after school, and we didn't want to have to call in the superintendent to discipline that boy. She didn't. So we got him I got him on the front seat, and I commenced to tell him how nice he was and how much I thought of him, and how bad he made me feel, and I don't know what I said, but I know that. And of course, I think he thought I was kind of in love with him. So I said, now, what was his name, Chester?
I think.
Chester, you're my favorite one, and I'm going to let you sit up here right by me, and I have to scold you once in a while so the kids won't think you're my favorite. And Miss Byrne got in, and we got his books and put him right up by me, and we made it up among ourselves. We let him run all the errands for us, take a note to here, take a note, because he couldn't learn anything anyway, And I couldn't teach him anything. I'll say that for myself. I didn't teach him much. I had a good time with him. And so that summer he went off to work in the harvest field. Now, you know he's a big boy, big as you. He wrote me a letter and sent me his picture. And at the same time, I found out he had written Mamie Oliver a letter and sent him his picture. So she was my rival. Oh, I thought that was the funniest thing. But I really enjoyed teaching. Loved it. And I taught far more after I got married and come back to Guthrie. I've been away 12 years. Because taught every day all the time then.
Where did you teach the Guthrie?
Just every place, wherever they needed somebody. I didn't want to. They just needed somebody to entertain the kids. So I just went and had a good time with them. Just had a big time.
Now, when did you first come to Guthrie?
In 1900.
1900.
See.
Why don't you describe Guthrie as you remember it in 1900?
Well, do you know where I lived? It's 601 North Division. There used to be an old mill. Flour mill right on the same end of the block. And we walked up the hill to town. And we went uptown. I know the first day we got to town, got ourselves fixed up, went, Mama, let's go to the bakery and buy some baker's bread. You know, that was a treat in those days. Mom said, and when I get to Guthrie, the first thing I want is all the baker's bread and the beefsteak I can have, because we'd always make our own bread. Well, anyway, we kids runs up to the Ritz Hot Bakery, somewhere uptown. And on the way up, there was a man out in the yard with a big kettle of smoking going on, and he was making chewing gum, Wrigley's chewing gum, on the way uptown. It's run by Tallman someplace, wasn't it? Up in there someplace. So anyway, then of course we all started to church on Sunday. That's the main thing, get up and go to church. And we all went to school. My father was principal of the high school. No, he was
Logan County High School.
Yeah, Logan County High School. He established that Logan County High School. And that was the first one in the state. And anybody in Logan County could go to that school free. The county paid the taxes, don't you, the salaries. And the city too, I guess. The whole county paid it. And then after that, my father was principal of the high school, and after that, he's city superintendent. So really and truly, all of my folks have been school people. And see, when my mother was a girl, she was taught in high school before she was married. So you know, she was no slouch.
Did you give me your father's name?
W.S. Calvert.
W.S. Calvert.
Calvert.
He was now, what was the size of Guthrie when you came here?
You know, as I
Do you
said.
remember about?
No, I don't, but it was larger than it is now. Yes, it was larger than it is now.
Do you remember the name of the flour mill?
The flour mill?
Yeah.
Williams, because they lived right across the street. That's where they lived, in that house right there. That was their home right there, the Williams flour mill.
What happened to it?
Well, they sold it, didn't they?
It was a large family.
Yeah, this big family. The girl was an opera star singer, wasn't she? Didn't she?
Lived in Puget.
Yeah, she was an opera star singer.
Some of them were singers. They all sang.
They
In
all
fact, were
sang.
musical
And
family.
this girl, wasn't her name Maud Williams? Something like that. She finally went to opera. She was an opera singer. She lived right across the street there.
Who were some of the personalities of the time in Guthrie at that time when you first were here?
Well, now I'll tell you something. Mamie Oliver's father was with the mill, wasn't he? Cotton mill.
Which mill was that?
Well, it was the cotton gin.
Cotton gin here in Guthrie.
Down on Noble and 6th Street. It's been torn down now.
And Jake Douglas was in there.
Mhm.
Jake Douglas. and they were in the, I'll mention those first, and then they had Houghton's. He run
F.E. Houghton was a merchant.
merchant, and everybody traded with Houghton's that lived west of the Cottonwood River. Everybody traded at that grocery store. And then,
Could you describe the grocery store at that time?
no, just you get anything you wanted, couldn't you?
That's right.
You can get meat and potatoes and flour and I expect drugs. No, the Blessings
No.
run a drugstore
Drugstore
on the west
street.
side of the street.
You know, young people today don't really know what an old-time grocery store
No,
was.
they
you
don't.
know,
Well,
on
it
the
was just a
supermarket.
typical grocery store.
Why
Had
don't, you
sugar.
why don't you tell about it, because a lot of young people today have never seen an old-fashioned
Well, I'll tell you about one that my young brother worked in when he was 9 years old. It was the Herschel grocery store, and it was there by the city hall, isn't it? Just across, just north of City Hall. And this kid, brother of mine, went to work there at 9. When he was 9 years old, and he got $1 a week, and thrilled to death to get it. Delivered groceries with a horse and buggy, and he'd go around one morning and take orders, and then go to the store and they'd fill them, and they have sugar in barrels, and coffee in barrels, crackers in barrels, and cheese up on the counter, great big round where you cut cheese, and kids just mouths watered when they went in that store, any store, that cheese are looking at them, and they didn't have any money to spend. And candy in barrels, or buckets, bucket, jelly in buckets, bucket jelly. And that's about all I know of different than they are now. And that's one of the main things. And of course, Guthrie has always been an educational social center, more or less. Don't you think? Mainly social. We had high-class people in Guthrie. They all came here in the early days, classy, well-educated people, making a start, like the Judge Beers and the Frank Dales. Judge Dale, Judge Cottrell, Dr. Hughes, and you could just name a dozen of them.
Can you talk a little about the social life in 1900? What was?
Oh, they just like they do now. The women all dressed up in nice clothes, wore hats, gloves. Never went in without a hat and gloves on. And I never saw a woman on the street with a sunbonnet on. Did you?
I never did either.
No, they talk about sunbonnet. That makes me mad when they have 89ers having to dress like that. My folks was early people, and my mother never went away from home without a girdle on, hat on, gloves on, and we kids never had a sunbonnet on away from home. We had them at home to keep from getting sunburned, but we didn't wear them. But then, that's not 89ers in my book. It makes me mad. I call it an insult.
Most people.
We didn't go like that.
What other things about 89ers do you feel maybe are inaccurately portrayed now?
Well, now I'll tell you something. You know, when I was a girl, on New Year's Day, they always had open house over town. The different women would open house, and they would invite their young girlfriends and their hostesses, and everybody in town, all the boys and the men and women, everybody went and called on this house, and they had coffee and cookies. Made all the rounds, and like where I was, where my fellow would come, he'd come that last place. Of course, that's the way he'd take you home. That's the way they worked that. But they always had those social things. The ladies were nice, and I call Guthrie a cultural town, high class.
What was the favorite, the most,
they had
top places in Guthrie at that time?
You mean the top part?
For entertainment and for parties and that.
Oh, well, I'd say Judge Beers and Holmes, and the Dales and the Hugheses and the Cotterells, and
Why don't we call the full names if you remember them, where you do?
Well, I like Mrs. A.G.C. Beerer, Judge Beerer, and Mrs. Frank Dale, Judge Dale's wife, and Dr. Hughes' name? G.A. Hughes, he's my dentist, and Dr. Furrow, W.E. Furrow, he was a dentist, and there's more, and Judge Cotterell, Mrs. John Cotterell, he was a federal judge in time, and he was something then, wasn't he, Mamie?
Yes, he was.
He was a judge of some description, but he was federal judge later, and Mr. Filson,
Charles.
Charles Filson, he was,
Oh, yes.
yes, he was the big shot. He was bank examiner, state bank examiner. He was a big shot. They had, and all these lovely homes open up. Ladies that open up their homes. More than that, I can't remember them all, but they always had nice things.
Now, your territorial governors were here too.
Yes.
Did you know any of them?
Oh, we knew them all.
Why don't you tell us those?
About
tell me
the-
about those you knew beginning.
Well, Tom, let's see. Where was the Jenkins? They was along with the first, weren't they? Who was the first one, maybe?
Well, I don't know, was it,
No, Haskell was the last one after statehood. It was quite weak.
but you're talking about territorial government?
Who was the first one?
Was he from Kingfisher?
That was Tom
Say.
Jenkins, wasn't
Well,
it?
honey, no, Jenkins was after Barnes.
Was he after Barnes, Governor Barnes, and who was
The
before?
first one I can remember. C.M. Barnes,
Well, then Judge C was ahead of him.
yes, and he was from Kingfisher.
He was from Kingfisher, C. Oh, this will be terrible if they print this off page.
Well, they're just gonna use it on there.
Oh, well, I just embarrassed me to death. What's happened?
They didn't get their machine started.
Well, it's all right. If they didn't get it, we don't care.
The order is not really to him. Did you know Judge?
The Judge C was the first, C
yeah.
was the first
All
one.
right.
Then the next one was.
Tell me about C.
Well, honey, I just don't know
You
enough
don't
to
know
tell it.
enough.
No. Mm-mm.
Who did you know personally?
Well, the Barneses, C.M. Barneses.
Tell us about C.M. Barnes.
Well, I don't know enough to tell about it. I know more about the Jenkinses. The Barneses had a beautiful daughter. I know that. And she married some army officer, didn't she?
She married Carl Haddinghorst,
Yes.
lived right across the street from him.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
But she was the most popular girl in
Yes,
Guthrie.
she was. She was a beautiful girl. Beautiful.
Dr. C.S. Petty was one of her
Oh, yes.
followers.
Oh, yes. Dr. Petty was one of the early times. Uh-huh.
Tell us about Governor Jenkins, if you remember.
Well, they lived in a house right next to the Methodist church.
That's right.
And
A
they
brick
came,
house.
brick house, and they came here from Kingfisher. Where did they come from? Sapulpa. Anyway, Tom Jenkins, or Governor Jenkins, and they was very nice people. And they had some children too.
They did.
They had some children, but I don't know the ages of them. They had children. All these governors have made nice governors that we had. And then come along the Haskell.
Yeah, and
After-
not so nice.
Governor Haskell, and he was that's when they had Oklahoma.
Well, we were talking about that coming over. Why
That's
don't you
Stealing the capital.
why don't you tell about the
Maybe
reaction?
you tell about Governor Haskell.
Well, we'll get on her. We're going to interview her right here.
Well, now, we don't want to make each other out one or the other. Well, you see, Governor Haskell had two lovely daughters, Frances, and she finally married the editor of our paper, the Niblacks, you know. And what did the other one? Jane married somebody else, and who did she marry, Mamie? I don't know.
She married away from here.
Yeah, she married somebody away from here, and Frances still living, or was the last I heard.
Oklahoma City.
Yeah, she lives in Oklahoma City. I think she works at the Capitol or somewhere, doesn't she, or does she do
Oh, I
anything?
don't think she does anything.
Well, maybe she doesn't do anything anymore. But of course, they had a stormy time. You see, we had the Constitutional Convention here in Guthrie, and that was quite an event. Oh, well, I'll tell you something. I was a girl then, and we had a lot of young boys in that convention, good-looking like Scott Ferris, and those boys. I suppose you know who he was, did you, Scott Ferris? Well, he's somebody. And anyway, these boys, we gals, would get around, and they'd give us passes to the legislature, certain seats, and they'd see that we got in there and got us a good seat and all. So we made that a regular event, but it was quite an event. And old Bill Murray was Speaker of the legislature, and he was a rough and tumble, old Bill. You know Johnson, don't you? Johnson Murray. And when I was a bride, I lived up on North Broad, and the Murrays lived just across the alley from me in a house, in the Griswold house. And the kids, the Murray kids would come. I was just young then. They'd come over in my backyard and watch me hang out my clothes. So anyway, the clothesline broke down one day, and I don't know. Johnson said I thought the kids broke it down, and I don't know yet what they did. Of course, that's the last. My husband never let me do any washing. That quit it. He was just mad at me for washing. He didn't approve of women washing. So that took care of the washing. I've never had any done since at home.
Tell about the reaction in Guthrie at the time of the removal.
Well,
of
they
the
were
seal.
plenty mad. And it was all done, and they could do nothing about it. They were just, what you call, just darn mad. Good as they could be, and thought Haskell betrayed them all. Whether he did, I don't know. He had a lot of help. Bill Cross and all of them was in on that. So I don't know enough about that, but I know they was all plenty mad. We was all mad.
The
Oh, listen, one of my main women in Guthrie was Mrs. Carter. Miss N.M. Carter. She was the ramrod of the town, of the women's. She was the Carrie Nation of the town, and Carrie Nation lived here in those days, too.
tell about her.
Well, I know she had a hatchet. She lived over on the west side in a house she had a little window upstairs on Warner. But I never did see her, but all the men around town and uptown knew her. They knew when they saw her coming. But I never did see her.
This other woman you're talking
Miss N.M. Carter, she was the one, really, she's what you'd call the ramrod of the women's organizations in town. Anything was going on, she's the one that helped get the library to Guthrie. She's the one that wrote to the Carnegie Foundation and got the library. And when Miss Carter said something, well, all the men down at the city hall, they listened because Miss Carter wasn't afraid to take in on them. And she was a nice-looking old lady. I'd call her, maybe she wasn't as old as I am, but she wore long dresses. She hadn't got into short dresses. And she was a brilliant lady. She was she's quite a club woman. And the club women in those days was what the garden clubs are now. They kind of civic-minded and try to do something for different things and different organizations. Help out us all they can. But she was really the mainstay of the women, don't you think?
I think so.
And the other women all backed her up. Miss Carter took the lead, and she wasn't afraid to get out and buck them and get her name in the papers that they was against something and this and that. But she was a lovely lady, an educated. I don't know where she's from, do you? East. But she was a lovely lady and refined and had a lot of wonderful ideas. All these women that we mentioned, was class, really. They were class, cultural and literary and everything.
Were the Dennis Flynn's here when you were here?
Was the what?
The Flynn, Dennis Flynn.
Yeah.
Did you know Dennis Flynn?
Oh, he was our congressman.
Yes. Can you tell
Well,
about him?
I don't know, because see, that's not my side of the fence. I wouldn't know much about him.
Can you tell about the obtaining of the library, as you remember, for Guthrie?
The bringing, it was here when I came, I don't know. But I know Miss Carter was the main one. She was the one that got the library in Guthrie. And I know when Sugar and I was in Europe, any town we went in, that's where is the Carnegie Library, I felt at home. I didn't feel like in a strange land at all. And we all through France and Italy, not in every little town, but different ones. You see this Carnegie Library, and I said, well, I feel at home. Something about it.
You were talking about going to the Carnegie Library when you were girls.
Oh, yes.
The trips down there.
We went there. We went to get a book. We weren't allowed to go walk on the street. But we could go to the library, and you could be reading a book. You could stay a little while. But we had to be home certain times. I was raised pretty strict when I was a girl, which I approve of.
Can you describe,
I don't even know who was librarian then. No, I don't remember.
Maud Goodrich, I imagine.
Oh, I bet she was, Mamie. Maud Goodrich. She's a music teacher for a while, and then she went to the library. And then they've had so many different ones. But it's been a lovely thing for the town.
is it the same building or is it a different building?
Say, this is the same. No, it's this one they're remodeling. Finishing, doing.
In the museum.
A museum. Same one.
Will this be the transportation museum? This new transportation museum?
I never heard of a transportation
I
museum.
thought it was going to have a lot of transportation things in it.
Well, I don't know. Anyway, it's the Carnegie Library. That's all I know. It still be that, only added to.
What were the places of entertainment in Guthrie at that time?
Well, I tell you something. We just kind of made our own. We had parties, dances. I think everybody in those went to church and they had church parties and sit up there everybody died and all that kind of thing. Well, we just lived the same kind of life you live now, don't you think? Sure.
I think there was more entertainment in the home.
By far, everybody entertained at home. You know, the women cooked, the kids cleaned up the house, and they invited their friends in, and they had their entertainment right there at home. And see, they didn't have picture shows until about 1907, somewhere along in there.
Did they have an opera house?
Oh yes, an
Tell
opera
about it.
house. Oh, the old Royal Hotel. It's torn down now. The old Royal Hotel.
Tell about the Royal Hotel.
Well, it was, I thought it was heaven on earth. First date I ever had with my husband took me to the Royal Hotel to, what's that show where the lion comes through the poppies? Wizard of Oz. My sugar was a young kid. He lived down here. He taught in school out in the country, and he walked to Guthrie. I had written me a letter. I'm going to come. I got to take a stake at the show, and I want to know if you're right. Let me know if you'll go. Of course, you know I could go. It's on Thanksgiving. And we went to that, and oh, was I thrilled to death. I never forget the lion coming through the poppies. And oh, we always went to everything nice at the Opera House. That was part of our culture, I guess. Never missed a thing.
Where did the troupe come from?
I have no idea.
Oh,
All over it.
New York company?
Yes, it was a company. Oh, we used to have good shows. Real shows. That's where we were at. And everything nice that came to Oklahoma stopped here in Guthrie. See, Guthrie was one of the highlights of Oklahoma.
Principal city of that.
Yes, it was the capital at that time, don't you see?
The territory. What were the early industries as you remember them? You mentioned the flour mill.
Well, they had cotton gins. Cotton gin. Well, you see, cotton.
Can you remember any of the names of any of these or anything about them?
I told you the Williamses run the flour mill, and the Douglas.
W.H. Coyle.
Oh yes, he's a cotton mill. W.H. Coyle. He run the cotton mill. Cotton gin.
Where was that?
Was down there where those mills.
Towards the park.
Down towards the park, all across the railroad track, down in there.
Now,
Yes.
with the Rithoffs, was that the Dr. Rithoff family?
That's his mother and father. They ran a bakery. And they ran a good one, too.
Is that right?
Good bakery. At least we thought it was good. And the Sex Hours run a bakery.
Say that.
Yes, that was a good bakery, too, the Sex Hours. And really, Guthrie was a high-class town in those days. It was classy. And I still think it is, or I wouldn't live here, because I don't have to.
Tell about the early capital. I know that sometime, I know when I came to Oklahoma,
Well, that used to be the courthouse.
I know it was. Tell
Well,
us
it's
a little
just-
about that.
Well, I don't know enough about it, but it's still down there.
Tell about the early capital. I know that sometime, I know when I came to Oklahoma,
Well, that used to be the courthouse.
I know it was. Tell
Well,
us
it's
a little
just-
about that.
Well, I don't know enough about it, but it's still down there.
Yes.
They would have moved it if they could have. If they could have gotten it down there to the
They just
Huckins.
couldn't load it.
Just couldn't load it in the car that went down. That's the only reason. We have some good excuses for keeping something at home.
That's great. When did they build when did the Masonic group take over?
Well, it was here when I moved to Guthrie. They had the Masonic temple here when I moved to Guthrie.
And did they, they added on and eventually.
Well, I'll tell you something. You see, it's the capital. Go ahead, Mamie.
I was just going to say that the first Masonic temple was on the corner of Broad and
Right.
Harrison.
Harrison. That's
Right across the street from what was the Capitol.
yes, right across the street from the
And
Capitol.
that is where the Masonic hospital is now, and home.
And home for the aged. That's right across in there. Hmm.
And then the next step.
Yes, and then they had the thing back of the temple, that long-looking building. That was what was going to be the Capitol out in there. Don't you see?
Why don't you now? You said that you observed part of the Constitutional Convention.
Oh yes.
Right, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Can you
No, I really couldn't. I know Senator Owens was one of the Constitutional Convention, Senator Robert L. Owens, and Bill Murray, and Scott Ferris, and Judge Sam Hayes, and some of those men. But I don't know anything they done.
Which individuals impressed you the most at the Constitutional Convention? You mentioned Bill Murray.
Well, Scott Ferris. No, I suppose Bill Murray was one of the main ones because he was rough and tumble, you know. And he and Leslie Niblett got in a fight, and they threw inkwells at each other and had knew that kind of a goings on.
Henry Johnson was in that, wasn't he?
Yes, Henry Johnson was there too. Yes, he was there too. So we had a lot of all these people, political people that's dead and gone were there.
Do you remember in 1939 when they had this a reenactment, sort of a reunion of all the people who were still living, who had been part of that, coming for a reunion and going through some of the same ceremonies?
I kind of remember something about it. Do you remember?
I don't remember anything definite. I know they did have it.
They had it, but I don't know anything definite about
We
it.
have some of that on.
I don't know anything about that.
Can you think? Do you remember Senator Owens? Can you tell me anything about him?
Oh, listen, I really, he was a distant relative of way back of my family. And, you know, nothing unusual for us to come home from school in the evening and my dad would come bringing him in to have dinner with us. And, you know, I was raised in a big family. And we just put on another plate. That's the way I do. If anybody comes to my house, I don't fix anything. Just get another plate and have them sit down. And he was quite a frequent guest in our home at that time. And when my sugar and I went to Washington to President Roosevelt's inauguration, why, Senator Owens came down to the hotel to see all the Oklahoma people. And he saw us, and he said, listen, I want to take you with me to the White House this afternoon. I was invited to the tea at the White House. So when we went into the course, you would naturally be thrilled to go with Senator Owens any place. And when we went into where Mrs. Roosevelt was receiving, she said, well, Senator Owens, good evening. And he introduced us as his Oklahoma friends, you know. And he was so wonderful that really we just need somebody like him right now.
And he was handsome.
Oh, handsome. Good looking and smart. He was good looking and smart.
Can you?
See, I've had a good time in my day with all these old boys and gals.
You know, we have Senator Owen on tape too.
Oh, do you? Senator Robert L. Owen. Oh, he was handsome, dark eyes and dark hair.
Part Indian.
Yes, he was part Indian. And when we was in Washington that time, I thought he's really one of the outstanding looking men up there in the whole outfit. He just had character.
You may know that a week and a half ago, they had this ceremony at Tahlequah where he was, and we used our voices of Senator Owen were a part of that
Is
ceremony.
that so? That
Yes.
would be something nice.
Yes, well, we had the voices that we had of Senator Owen were used just before the unveiling of the monument at the Salaji. And Senator Monroney was there, and many others were
Mary, do you know that Betty Bullison, you know Betty,
Yeah.
her son married Mike Owens, Mike Monroney's niece.
Yeah, I remember.
So Mike and I kissing cousins.
Can you tell me anything else about any other specific things about Senator Owen? He's certainly one of the great Oklahomans.
I don't know any too much more about him. I know he lived over in eastern Oklahoma around Tahlequah. Muskogee.
You don't recall any specific instances or any specific...
In the legislature? No.
No, I'm not thinking of the legislature. I'm thinking of when he's visiting your home. Or visiting with
Well,
your
he'd
family.
visit with my mother and father, and you see, I would be around doing up the dishes or something. I didn't pay too much
There's
attention.
no specific thing
No,
you
nothing
said
special.
that
Nothing special.
Can you think of the time you visited him in Washington, other than this trip to the White House? Was there anything else particular about Senator Owen that might be worth mentioning?
Well, no, because we just went to the White House, of course. you know, I had heard how much drinking was going on, so I tried to drink out of every pot and cup and saucer up there, see what all. I didn't want to be tipsy or not before I got home, but I didn't find anything, so I guess I did. I haven't told San Antonio, that's what I was trying to find, and we had a lot of fun. No, I can't think of it. But, you know, they tell such wild tales about things. I just get out and get around and see what's going on. There wasn't nothing cooking that I could see. They had it hidden from me.
But let's think in terms of other individuals. Can you think of any I'm thinking of personalities like Senator Owen who are a part of history and who will always be a part of history from Guthrie that ought to be mentioned that you may have known?
I really don't know. Remember, special. You see, this I haven't been thinking about any of this. I told Bill Lehman I didn't know a darn thing to tell you. I didn't know what they come there to see me.
A lot of good stuff.
Well, so I don't know anything about anything because I wasn't thinking about these things in those days, and I've had so many things happen since then that.
Now you have been involved in the civic community and some of the in Guthrie, haven't you?
Yes, I have, and I'll tell you.
Tell us about the areas that you have been involved in.
Well, I'll tell you. First, I was county vice chairman of the Democrat Party for 28 years and had the time of my life working. Well, up around till 32. Lonely, right there. Before that, because by that time I was state vice chairman of the Democrat Party. And I have enjoyed meeting people, working with people, and finding out that people in politics are not bad. It's just the bad ones that get around. But the main ones are pretty decent people, because I considered myself pretty classy. And I didn't run with trash. Did I, maybe? No.
Now, in your 28 years, thinking in terms of some of the people that, in this capacity that you worked with, who were some of the political people that you...
In my county? All right. I had Mose Anderson. He was our county vice chairman, county chairman. Then I had Mr. J.D. Murphy. And let me see more, and somebody else. And Mr. W.H. Matthews at Mulhall. And Judge Charlie Smith. I worked with all those men.
Are there any comments that you might be able to make on any of these, and even better than comments, any specific experiences with any of these people?
Well, I'll have to tell you, when I started out, our county was so overwhelmingly Republican. And when we ended up, we always carried the county for the Democrat Party. And it's done pretty good ever since. And the men and the women got out and done just as much helping out with the ticket as the men did. But we women never bothered with the finances. If the man couldn't pay it, it wasn't paid, because we never collected money. I never spent money. It was just my husband could finance me if I needed any money. And so we never handled money. We never got in any trouble over finances. Let the men get out. If they didn't raise it, it's just too bad. Nobody paid any attention. And the women just got out and just got themselves out and voted. That's the main thing you have to do. That's all you have to do in politics is go vote.
Now, you were involved in the politics prior to, you say you started in 32 or you finished?
Before that.
You started before 32. Did you start before?
Just when women commenced to voting.
That's what I was wondering.
I happened to go, we had a sheriff, Tom Bogus was our sheriff. And he insisted that we all come to the precinct meetings. Now, that I didn't know what that was. And Judge Bowles, he was a Republican. Yes, and he was a nice gentleman. And we all, the Democrats and Republicans, all went out to his house and got out in the street. And we all decided who would be for the Democrats and who'd be the Republicans. We all just big friends, never knew that. I didn't know the difference. Being, we all liked each other.
Were you involved in any effort in the women's suffrage movement?
No, I'm not interested in that. I tell you something, I think women got plenty to do it, be at home. But then as long as they give them the vote, well, I got out and went, because that's my duty. And I do think it's a woman's duty.
Sure. But
I'm
not thinking women's lib. I was thinking
No, and I wasn't interested in that at all. Because I would just as soon let the men run it. I'm not that suffragette. Let them get out and carry the ball. The women spend their money, let them go on.
Let the women tell the men how to vote.
That's right. They all vote about alike. They just vote about alike. And then after all of that, why, I quit doing in politics because I was appointed head of the Women's War Savings, the Women's Division of the state. And when I got that, this 42.
42.
And when I got that telegram from Henry Morgenthau to be down at the federal building in Oklahoma City at a room such and such a time at 10 o'clock, it scared me to death. I thought, my Lord, something wrong with our income tax. And I called my husband. He was postmaster. And I said, oh, sugar, come home. I've got a telegram from Morgenthau, and he wants me to be in Oklahoma City at the federal building at 10 o'clock on Monday morning. And this was Friday. And I said, I'm scared to death. What, is anything wrong? And he said, no, nothing's wrong. I don't know a thing about it. Forget it and go on. I was going to play cards. And he says, forget it. Go on. And I went to play cards that afternoon with Virgil Lee Hughes, and I was so nervous I like to died. And my husband wouldn't even go with me. And I didn't know what 206 was. Go let that young man in. I don't know. Mamie?
Now, that's a sneaky thing. They're going to take a picture.
Well, they're not going to take my picture because I'm the take the office picture in town.
We don't need any. Oh.
You son of a gun, come in. Where was I going to?
We were talking about Mr. Morgenthau. You're getting ready to go to that meeting.
Oh, yes. And I was just so nervous from Friday till Monday. I thought I was going to be in the penitentiary, and I didn't know what on earth had happened. And so I went down to 206, and I didn't know what 206 was, and went in as H.C. Jones, Internal Revenue. And I was so relieved. I said, H.C., what on earth has happened? I really thought I was getting ready to go to the penitentiary. My sugar would not go in with me. He said, if you can't hold your own with them, you don't need me. And so I went in. He said, well, now listen, if I'm talking to you and Lou Wentz comes in, and I want to have a little private talk with him, but I think nothing of it, you excuse yourself, and then we'll talk it all over. And they wanted me to be head of this war bond, the women of the, and H.C. Jones was the chairman. And Lou Wentz was the big shot of he was, the rich man of Oklahoma. And so I said, well, H.C., what on earth did they want me? I don't know anything about it. He said, don't any of us know anything about it? And we'll all learn together. So I went in pretty soon. Paul Taylor, the El Reno superintendent, came in, and Elmer Harbor, the banker over at Shawnee, and Lou Wentz, and I was the only woman sitting there, and I just trembling on him. I tell you, my heart was up to here. You could like to see me, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I was scared to death. And anyway, we all sat down there, and they said, now, we've all got to be fingerprinted. And what do you have these men come to town? FBI come to town, check you. So I said, well, that won't bother me, and I won't bother to be fingerprinted. And then they had us go in a room, and we all had to sit down and write our life's history. How old was you when you done this? And I first sat down, I said, I just don't remember. And I just wasn't going to worry myself. Because I didn't. And I wasn't going to put down the wrong date. And so we was all fingerprinted. And Paul Taylor from El Reno, he's superintendent of city school, and he and we had a lot of fun together because he said he was as scared as I was. He thought something wrong with his school, and I thought something was wrong with sugar in the office. And so anyway, then the FBI men come to town, so I can talk pretty good. I've been through that and got past okay. And he went into Sugar and said, now, Mr. Martin, I don't want you to feel bad. I got to check on your wife. Sugar said, wish you would. I'd like to check on her myself. So anyway, he said, I went to one man. He said, get on out of town. She's okay. So they only interviewed one man. So I got by.
Tell us about Mr. Wentz.
Lou Wentz?
Yes, everything.
Well, he's just like you. He was just as nice as he could be. And he done a lot of charity for Oklahoma. This home over here, this children's home, he really financed that. And in fact, built a swimming pool and everything. But he done so much, I couldn't even go in on him because he's done everything. He's done everything with money. He done what everybody would like to do that had the money. And people would do just as much, but they don't have the money. Isn't that right, Mamie?
I think so.
I think that's right. He wasn't any different than anybody else. He was just very agreeable.
Can you think, as a personality? Is there anything outstanding that might be worth mentioning that you can think of, or any experience that you had?
No, I didn't have too much with him. We was all being fingerprinted. He was being fingerprinted and filling it out just like I was. And he wasn't scared, but I was. I'm not saying I wasn't scared. I was scared to death. But you see, that wasn't bad. But when you speak for the government, they have to be sure.
Now, this backtracks a little bit, but tell us a little about how it was in Guthrie at the beginning and during World War I.
I wasn't here then.
Oh, you were not?
No,
Where were you?
I was lived at Crescent at that time.
Oh, tell about Crescent during World War I.
Oh, listen, that's the first time. You know, when I was a girl, I thought a woman that got out of her house and said a word, she wasn't hardly the right kind of a woman, you know. I was raised old-timey. Mamie knows how her mother was that way and my mother was that way, and we was all raised like that. And so during the war out there, why, we had to sell war bonds. You know, what was it? You done for the Red Cross. I worked for in the Red Cross. Victory bonds. And so the different banks, you know, would have people in their banks, you know, to sell, ask people to buy them. So one bank told Sugar they wanted me to come to their bank. Well, I didn't know what to do. But anyway, Ina Pentecost, you remember Miss Homer Adams? She and I they had us in one bank. And all these old boys come in the bank. We'd ask them, and they'd buy bonds. You know, just people had money out in there in those days. And so that's the first time I ever got out and done anything at all away from my own home was then. And then after I come back to Guthrie, why then when they didn't have anybody to take care of the kids, I'd go to school, had a good time. I just had a good time with them.
Now, why don't you tell a little of some of your experiences as the war bond chairman for
the state?
Yes.
Well, I tell you, that was a great experience because we had to get to different organizations. You didn't do anything, only go into a town. And you see, I had been all over the state of Oklahoma, and I can go in any town and call up certain women that I knew, and they would tell me who else to call, and I'd invite them down to the hotel. We'd have coffee together or lunch, and then they would see if they could get different organizations in their town to sponsor the bond drive. You see, like business and professional women, they done worlds of good to buy these war bonds. I think 1 month they, in their organization, sold $383,000 worth of war bonds, got people to subscribe for them. And that's the way I done my war bond. I didn't get out on the street. I would just go into these towns and call up somebody I knew, generally the banker or the postmaster. He could come down to the hotel and tell me who would call to be a good one to some women that I knew maybe wasn't able to do things anymore. Bye-bye. Listen, I'm going to tell you goodbye, and I appreciate your kindness.
I do too.
I'll do you a favor.
First nice thing you've ever done for me.
But I'll do you a favor if I ever live long enough. Seen too many old women.
He got one.
Well, he's all right, yeah.
The
So really and truly, I had a nice time. I fell off 5 pounds every war bond drive, like weighed 119. My husband made me finally quit. But I didn't quit until it was just about over, but I couldn't. Would you? Excuse me.
Were there any specific experiences, funny or unusual or dramatic, that you can think of?
Honey, it was hard work. I fell
pretty
off
much
5 pounds. I worked night and day. And I felt like I neglected my husband part of the time, but as he said, I could do it and he didn't have time. See, he was postmaster and he couldn't do those things and I could. And so really I had a nice time. And we had a 1 page every month in the Ladies' Home Journal, the war bond of the women of the United States. And then one time I was called to Washington to Mr. Morgenthau called us. And Mrs. Roosevelt entertained us at a luncheon out on the White House lawn. All the women of the United States is on this war bond business was there. And she had little tents up all over you know how they do. You've been to the White House, haven't you? Anyway, they had that way. So then when she got all through, everybody helped themselves, buffet. She said now she wanted to hear some of the highlights from the women of the different states. I've always made up my mind I wasn't going to be the last one on nothing. So I got up and told my nickel's worth. And, of course, mine was the outstanding thing of that, that time, was the children in Oklahoma City. They all done without their lunches all over school for certain days of the week and bought the ship Oklahoma, enough money to buy the ship Oklahoma, which was a wonderful thing. And not only the children in Oklahoma City, but all over the state. And I think I don't know how many, $100,000. And old Bill Murray had made some big article in the Life magazine. I think he's running for president or something. And I just sorry Bill Murray wasn't there to hear that. I had to add that nickel's worth because I didn't want anybody to think that I represented that type of people, and I didn't, because I was cleaned up. And so some lady in the back of she got up and said she'd like to have that lady from Oklahoma tell that over again. She wanted to hear that. And I thought it was old Bill Murray's crowd. And I got up and I just told it all over again, and no, they just clapped, and that was the outstanding report of the whole thing of Oklahoma. Wasn't that something? Listen, Oklahoma's always been on the map when I get out, because I just put them there. I believe in it. I believe in Oklahoma, or I wouldn't live in it.
What other activity, now you mentioned the war bond, what other activity have you been involved in that might be worth it?
Don't you think that's enough?
Well,
I have been busy. I said the only reason I've lived so long, I haven't had time to die. I don't stop long enough.
Have you been involved with the library?
No, not anymore when I just get in the book.
Yeah.
No, I'm not. And I haven't been in on that at all.
Now, what else have you, what other activity have you been in on, you can think, where you have had a position either of leadership or where you have had a close involvement in something that has developed over the years?
Well, I don't think very many things going on that I haven't been in on.
Well, you belong to several federated
Oh, yes, I've been president of the Cambridge Club and Federated
Let's talk
Clubs.
about the Cambridge Club.
That was really, if you rated in the Cambridge Club with Mrs. Carter, why, you rated in Guthrie. Now, you can just say that, because she was kind of the boss of that Cambridge Club and the literary business. And then if you was rated literarily and socially, you was in the Acorn Club, and Miss Beerer was the head of that. And I don't know how I happened to make both of them.
Right.
Believe it or not, I put them hook or crook, I don't know, but got in both of them. We had a good time in both of them. One was more of it was literary, but it was social. We met in, now Miss Beerer's Acorn Club, we met in homes, and they had a tea party every time, a real party. The governor could have been invited, and he'd been special, good enough for anybody, and classy enough. And the Cambridge Club they had critics of the Cambridge Club. If you pronounced or something, the critic said you should have said this way. And Corioln Patterson was our critic, and she was good. Oh, we had a good time. We studied literature and different things. And I belonged to a club where I got married, and I cannot think of, and we met at the library on Tuesday nights, and behold, I can't believe the name of it. Don't even know what it was. Mamie, do you ever remember it? Tuesday evening. And we studied, I know, I just got through going to school all the time. They had English literature the first time. They commenced on all those classics. It's first year. And then the next one they commenced on Italy. And we studied all of that kind of stuff. So really and truly, I've had a good time. Played a lot of bridge. Belonged to my church.
Which church you belong to?
Christian church.
Christian church. Is it First Christian Church?
First Christian.
Well, why don't you tell about it?
Well, I'll tell you. That's to my notion, that's a good church. They're pretty lenient with you. And I have entertained my women's circle. Now, I'm not a church worker. I used to be. When my husband was on the church board, and one in the family to speak's enough. So he was on the church board, and he held his own. You know how the man always put the preacher out every so often, you know, Mamie, to get rid of the preacher, get a new preacher. Anyway, I let my husband do all that. But I always entertain my women's circle once a year, and I have never missed 1 year in 45 years entertaining them. That's part of my high life, my church work. And I pay and I go to church. But I don't get out and go to everything, because since my husband's gone, I keep my place at home.
You mentioned the Cambridge and Acorn Club. Are either of those
No, not anymore. The Acorn Club has, enough of our members that had been in the Acorn Club have moved to Oklahoma City, and some of their offsprings have an Acorn Club in Oklahoma City. But ours was the first in the state at this time, our Acorn Club. And Miss Bearer was the responsible for that. She was, whatever Miss Bearer said, that was the thing we done. And whatever Miss Carter said in the Cambridge Club, that was it.
Do you have children?
No, I have no family.
Your husband was postmaster
Mhm.
of Guthrie for
Mhm.
how long?
15 years.
15 years. What was he prior to that?
What was he, what?
What was he doing prior to that?
He was in the lumber business, the Arkansas Lumber Company.
In which company?
Arkansas Lumber Company.
That
Mhm.
was for-
It's gone, it's over with now. They have sold it out.
Can you, do you know anything about the Arkansas Lumber Company? Can you tell us anything about that?
Oh, well, so I guess I can. Lou Beeland was the president of the Arkansas Lumber Company, and my husband, that's all he knew till he went in the post office, was the lumber yard, lumber company. And let me tell you something. When we was in Europe, landing at Liverpool on our ship, why,
When was that?
well, it's 15 years ago, there's some seagulls just kept coming
You
around.
want me to answer that?
Yes,
Tell 'em
you
you're
tell.
busy.
Yes, tell 'em I'm busy. And I said, oh, look at those seagulls. So some man standing there by me. See, we travel first class, and then when you're all getting ready to go off of the ship, well, everybody got together. So some man standing there that I had never met on the ship on our tour. And so I said, oh, look at those seagulls. And he said, lady, don't you know over here those are English sparrows? And I kind of thought that was funny. And I said, well, no, at home we call them seagulls. And he said, no, those are English sparrows. And thank you, Miss Mamie.
Ethel Archer, call her when you get through.
All right. So he said, oh, those are English sparrows. And I thought, well, I never saw anything like that before. I said, well, we call them seagulls. And he says, and I said, sugar, I know that's not English sparrow. Come with this man. And just Sugar come over, and he had a Masonic ring on, and this man did too, but I hadn't noticed that. And he says, oh, well, I guess I won't let him. He and I won't fall out because we both wear the same ring. Well, that's the first time I noticed it. So finally he says, well, where are you from? And we said, we're from the States. I forgot. He was from the States, some place here in the United States too. And he says, I said, from Guthrie, Oklahoma. I always got that Oklahoma apt. Because on our ship, they called me Oklahoma. And so he said, I was in Guthrie one time. It's the worst place I was ever in. I said, sugar, give him a biff. And he said, well, let me tell you. He says, I was traveling then for a cement company. And I got into Guthrie one Saturday evening, and I had 10 cents in my pocket. And I wanted to go to the post office to get my mail. I'd get my check then. And he said, I registered in at an I-owned hotel. I remember that. For he says, I'd like to starve to death. The post office was closed, and the clerk wouldn't cash my check. Said the boss was out. And he said, I had 10 cents. And he said, I had more crackers for 10 cents than you ever saw in your life. That's all I had from Saturday till the Monday and the post office opened. And he says, I just always had it in for Guthrie after that. But he says, a few years afterwards, my wife and I was going through Oklahoma, and I said, I want to stop and show you a town where I like to starve to death. So they stopped in Guthrie. And he said that when he got to Guthrie, he saw the most beautiful temple he went up he'd ever been in his life. It was Guthrie. And he said, that took care of Guthrie after that. I always remembered Guthrie from that Masonic temple. Well, wasn't that a coincidence? Uh-huh. So just a little world after all.
Do you recall anything about the lumber company in addition to?
Well, they built 3 houses from the lumber company. Built one out on Park Place. Lived there 9 months, sold it. Built one on Oklahoma Avenue. Lived there 3 years, sold it. Built this one and wouldn't sell it. Yes. Oh, Arkansas Lumber Company is one of the big lumber companies of the state, the Arkansas Lumber Company. It hired a lot of men, and they done busy. There's big buildings started up about that time.
What years were your husband postmaster?
Well, he quit in 55. Now 15 up from that back.
1940.
I can show you my husband's picture.
All right.
Good looking.
This concludes our interview with Mrs. Martin, and we will turn to the other side and we will visit with Miss Mamie Oliver.